The Chicago Manual of Style was first created by the University of Chicago Press in 1906, but rather than being a document about the current fashion trends of the time, it was conceived as a standardized method of writing books and publications. It's not the only manual of style. The Associated Press has their own, for instance, and there tend to be subtle differences between them. If you see disagreements online over certain formatting, such as the use of commas or whether a cited work title should be italicized or quotated, it's often a conflict between different manuals of style. But for the most part, a manual of style has one purpose: to unify the works created by a diverse group of people. And in an ongoing project like a card game, a unified manual of style has just as valuable a role. It's also practically invisible. Most players are able to easily pick up on the flow of the language of the cards and might not even be aware of the work that went into that, unless it's some of the more audacious changes, such as Magic the Gathering's 4th edition or Yu-Gi-Oh's Master Rule 3, introducing things such as the tap symbol and problem-solving card text. Done right, and it will be pretty easy to introduce complex ideas thanks to the assistance of the game's internal consistency. Take probably one of the most simply written cards of all time, Counterspell. Counterspell's effect simply reads, counter target spell. Now, this sentence is complete gibberish to people who aren't familiar with card games the way something like draw 2 cards might be, but I'll try. Setting the word counter aside for a bit, target simply means choosing the one thing that this card is affecting. That thing becomes the target that this card is targeting. And spell is any non-land card that is in the process of entering play, whose costs have been paid for but whose effects have yet to go off. This includes creatures and artifacts, as the spell is conjuring them into play. From this, counter is pretty easy to figure out. It stops that spell from working. Written in full text, it would read something like, choose a non-land card that is entering play. That card is discarded without effect. But by consolidating it into counter target spell, and by having these terms be consistent across all of the other cards in the game, players get what's happening. Yu-Gi-Oh, on the other hand, didn't get off so easily. Even after Master Rule 3, which introduced problem-solving card text, Yu-Gi-Oh still has a lot of it, to the point that the term graveyard got shortened to GY purely to save space. There's also this little tangle. Can be special summoned by, must be special summoned by, and must first be special summoned by all mean wildly different things despite the similar text, and it's easy to see how people might get confused. But even as confusing as its text might be, Yu-Gi-Oh still has a consistent manual of style, which begs the terrifying question, what happens when you don't have one? Probably the most common problem we get is the implied effect, where the card describes some sort of fictional action that doesn't really fit the bill of concrete card text. Saying that a character does a backflip or something doesn't really tell me what the card's action is actually saying. If the goal of such text was to inform how the card is supposed to work, the slack there can be taken up by the card name, art, and flavor text while sticking to something more concrete in the game text. Dry game text is fine, offset it with the aesthetic. But the bigger danger on a lack of manual of style is inconsistent card text. Like I detailed with my Magic the Gathering example, it can get away with short sentences for a lot of its effects because the terminology is consistent across all of the cards. But what does a game without this consistency look like? Well, for a pretty perfect example, we need look no further than the Yokai Watch trading card game. This shoddily made Hasbro cash grab was another spoke on the wheel that was the disastrous American launch of Yokai Watch. Rather than taking the perfectly good Yokai Watch trading card game that was just sitting there complete with an English version, Hasbro decided to quickly churn out their own. I am, to this day, astonished that the company in charge of Magic the Gathering botched this so badly. Although, considering Magic the Gathering's newest product, maybe I shouldn't be. The Yokai Watch card game is one that runs on the action economy, where you tap your yokai to perform actions, so forcing your opponent to tap their yokai without letting them take an action seems like a powerful effect, if it was properly written. Here we have 2 cards, Frostina and Quit. Now, on the surface, these two cards seem to have the same sort of effect. When they battle a yokai, they cause the yokai of the same type as that yokai to become tapped without action. But do they? Frostina has an obvious problem. The effect says tap all other yokai of the same type, but fails to clarify what this is relative to. Same type as what? Same type as Frostina? Same type as the yokai she fought? Same type as all other cards in play? It doesn't say. But on the other hand, we have Quit, who seems to have the second part of this effect figured out, stating how the effect is clearly based on the yokai he blocked in battle, but then the top half is confusing. Nowhere in the rulebook does it clarify what a successful block means. Is it the fact that he blocked it all, or does Quit have to win the battle in order for it to count? In which case, why doesn't it use the clear terminology from the top half of Frostina's card? You see what happened here? The text across these cards is inconsistent, and so we can't really understand their effects by using the other to get it. There was a clear breakdown on the part of the development team when it came to card text or rules clarification, though this was as much a symptom of the game's rushed development as it was poor organization. Like I said, obvious cash grab. The deception here is that it can feel really easy to keep this terminology straight in your head, but that doesn't necessarily apply to anybody who joins you on the project, and certainly not for players. So making sure that you have a solid glossary of terms that describes the vocabulary is an important first step, and another document determining how those terms might interact with each other is an important follow-up. There are certain collisions that are also important to keep in mind. For example, figuring out if a card effect might be abused. A famous example is how the card Toon Table of Contents can be used to search for additional copies of itself, which you can play in sequence, allowing players to boost spell counters or activate other effects basically for free while simultaneously thinning the deck. Some card text, like Toon Contents' spiritual successor Spell Power Grasp, state that you can only use a card of a certain name once per turn, while others specifically exclude themselves as a viable target, meaning they cannot grab themselves with their own effect. It all depends on how it gets used, and sometimes things slip between the cracks. Another is on omni-negating effects, such as cards that lock down an entire type. A basic example is the Magi Soraya from the game Magi Nation. His effect nullifies the powers and effects of all other Magi in play, but what happens when more than one Soraya is in play? Do they lock down each other? Well, as it turns out, it doesn't really matter. You see, there can only be two Magi in play at a time, and the ability nullification is Soraya's only ability, so whether the two cancel each other out is besides the point. But then we have an effect like Garbodor's Garbotoxin, whose ability nullifies all other abilities in play, and yes, there can be more than two Garbodors in play at a time. But what if the opponent also plays Garbodor? Well, you could say the effect doesn't affect Garbodors, but what if a Garbodor comes out with a different ability? Well, in this case, the ability was written with the proper care, where it specifically locks down abilities except those named Garbotoxin, keeping things clear. Garbodors do not cancel each other out, and if you have one or multiples in play, it doesn't matter, the effect is working regardless. Sometimes, this kind of text is necessary. When it comes to dealing with these sorts of situations, it's often a good idea to work on a series of master rules. These are a version of the rules that are a lot longer and deal with a lot of the minutia of your game, which works alongside the regular rules and the cards. And a manual of style can easily be spun off from this. It's always important to take at least a day going over a set of cards to make sure everything lines up with this manual before trying to go to print. Consider it part of the editorial and typo discovery process. Having a solid manual of style is an important thing to make sure that your game's terms remain clear and consistent. Keep those things in mind, and you too can build a better card game. Join us next time on Errata Text. Hey Hey, thanks for watching. Just thought I'd let you guys know that I have revamped my Patreon. Now, $1 per month is enough to get you access to the Kodak Discord channel. We're talking about Metabots right now. Also, $5 will get you a mention on the credits as seen by these guys right here. And special thanks to Spudmay and Team Mayorga, who have gone for the $100 level, where I am currently helping them give feedback and consultation on their games. I hope to see you there soon. My $300 goal, if I can get it to $300 a month, I will do a review of the Mattel Hyperscan at a level that no other developer has done yet. So if we can get just a few more people to join in, get your names in these credits, and we'll see if we can do some amazing stuff here. Until next time, this is Kodak signing off.